Om Shuklam Bharadharam Vishnum Shashivarnam Chaturbhujam Prasannavadanam Dhyayet Sarva Vighnopashantaye Saraswati Namastubhyam Varade Kamarupini Vidyarambham karishyami Siddhir bhavatu me sada Om Sahana vavatu Sahanau bhunaktu Sahaviryam karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vitvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Today we begin a Vedanta text called Upadesa Saram. Saram means essence. Upadesa Saram is the essence of teachings, referring to here the Vedantic teachings. These teachings have been given by a great sage of India whose name is Sri Ramana Maharishi. And this sage, this original work is a work in the Tamil language, but also later translated into Sanskrit. Sri Ramana Maharishi was born in 1879, December, and he was the second son to Sundaram Iyer. Before this name was declared for him, his name was Venkatraman. His childhood years are considered to be very normal. He would go to school, come back, do his studies. As a school-going boy, there was nothing significant noticed about him. Now and then absent-minded, would sleep very well. So these things didn't mean anything in this bigger picture to what he became. And his school years was with his father, but who he died young when Ramana Maharishi was young. And so he went to his middle school to Madurai, where he lived with his uncle and studied. Up to about age 16, his life is very normal. And around that time, in 1895 or so, he experienced his first event that took place in his life. He described it later in his own words, that one day while he was resting in his uncle's home upstairs, he suddenly had a grip of fear that he was going to die. An experience of death overtook him. And he chose to go with that experience and looked at what if he would die? What is death? And he laid there as a corpse, without moving, to see what would be the outcome. And he describes that it was like a flash. It all happened. There was no big thought process. It was something that impacted him, in which he saw that the body dies, the body is burnt, the body goes into its own source, but the I remains. And began his unique relationship with this I, the one who remains, who doesn't die. Who is he? What is that? And after that experience, his life was not the same. He began to neglect his studies, and it is said, a year later, he was given an imposition, in English grammar, and he had to do this imposition. And he was so frustrated and disgusted with that he thought, he's just wasting his time, let me just find who am I, So he sat in meditation, and his older brother came into the room, and he said, what's wrong with him? He is no reason to be here if he's going to be like this. Something he uttered in very harsh words, and that became a trigger for this young boy to think, yes, what am I doing here? I have no reason to be here. This is not what I want. And the family had given some money to pay the school fees for the brother. Before that, one day a relative came to the house, and he asked him, where are you coming from? And this relative said, Arunachala. So this young lad asked, Arunachala? He knew this word. This word had been somehow part of his awareness. It would recur in him, this word, this frequency. And he asked, what is that? is that a place? What is Arunachala? And he said, it's the holy hill, Lord Shiva. That's a place on earth? Yes, in Tiruvannamalai. And this young boy, when this situation rose in this manner, and he felt that there was nothing left to do, there was no reason for him to be there, he decided that he would go to his father. That's where he truly is drawn. And so he, from the fees, money that was given, he tried to find out. Some money would be needed to reach there. He took 3 rupees. Those days, 1896. He took 3 rupees to take the train and reach Tiruvannamalai. And he bought the ticket and got in and went. But the amount he took was not enough, to reach Tiruvannamalai. Before he left home, he wrote a note that I am leaving, but for good reason, and no one need to search me out. I am going for a good reason. And that note he left in the home and took the train and went. But he couldn't reach Tiruvannamalai. That ticket only allowed him to go thus far. So he got down and then started walking towards Tiruvannamalai. It was far away. He walked for about 10 kilometers and decided this is not the way. The only possession he had left was his gold earrings. Young Brahmin boys wore the earrings. So he took these earrings and he sold it, got money, and with that he climbed a train again and reached Tiruvannamalai. And there he went straight to the temple, and they say when he arrived, when he went into the temple, the doors were open, and he declared to the sanctum, to Lord Shiva, "Oh Father, I have finally come. I have reached your feet." After that, from that day, that September 1st, 1896, until 1950, I think, April 14th, when he attained Mahasamadhi, those 54 years, he never moved away from Arunachala, from this holy hill. His early days, he shaved his head, he threw away his clothes, all of that. Just wore a small loin cloth and moved around in that area. Went to different nearby the hill places. For 11 years he never spoke. For 11 years he never spoke. And he began to be noticed by people, They noticed him, they called him by different names. They understood he was a Brahmin boy. And but in the early days when he was moving, when he was in the temple, there were these street urchins, he was a young boy and they were also young, and they would throw, stones. They would throw stones at him because he wouldn't speak. And to escape this, he would first sit. There is in Tiruvannamalai temple, there is this 1,000-pillar mandapam, a place. He would sit there and be in meditation. But then as he moved around, when these urchins began to throw stones at him and so on, so there was one place, it was below, it was down, and there was a Shivalingam there. It was called Patala Lingam. But Patala is a lingam in hell. Patala is hell. The last hell, it was down there. And it was messy. There were cobwebs, there were things, there were lots of crabs and so on, and so wet. But nobody would go there. So he decided that is the best safe place to go. So he went to Patala Lingam and sat there. For days together he would be there. Until there was another saintly soul, Sheshadri Swamigal, who was older and who would be sitting in another area of this temple, the Murugan temple, in this main big temple. He also noticed this, and he went to retrieve this boy from that place. He was oblivious. He was oblivious to what was happening, and he had this, wounds all over his body, this crab bite and so on. But the boy was oblivious. He was taken out from there, and after that, this, like an older brother, this other saint, he protected him and took care of him. And this child continued to be, now 11 years, maunam, silence, he never spoke a word. And one day, a learned scholar, Kavya Kanta Ganapati Shastrigal, he came to him and told him, I have studied, I know the Shastras. I have been living in, I have done my japas, I do all that it is talked about, but I still don't have peace. I do not know what is real penance. Please tell me, teach me, And Ramana Maharishi broke his silence. After 11 years, he broke his silence and he told him to go to the source from where these thoughts emerge. Ask, who am I? Go into the source and the mind will rest there. The mind will find its peace only when it reaches the source, when it knows the source. That is real tapas. That is true penance, is what he told him. And after that, Kavya Kanta Ganapati continued to stay with him in that place, in Tiruvannamalai. And with this this great scholar, he declared that he is not just a boy, an ordinary person, he is a Maharshi. A Maharshi is a great sage. So he was declared as Ramana Maharishi. He gave the name, and people later began to call him Sri Ramana Maharishi. Many other people came, scholars came. There was another great scholar, Jagadishwara Shastrigal, who would write in Tamil, who knew the tradition, the scriptures, very learned people. He lived with Sri Ramana Maharishi for 25 years. He never spoke. Ramana Maharishi hardly spoke. It took a lot for him to say things. But he was a simple person who was peaceful, who radiated peace, and people would come and sit around him and sit with him and move away. Sometimes he answered. If somebody asked a question, so who is God? An answer might come, who are you? He would show in little statements that you are not away from the divine. And that's how he taught. But around him grew, many people would come to him and discuss the scriptures, and he would validate, yes, this is how it is, this is how it is. Because it was his experience, he had actualized. And then he began to thus hear the scriptures from these scholars around him. And they revered him as a person who had actualized the teachings. And he began to slowly contribute. He wrote some 5 verses in praise of Lord Arunachala. It's very beautiful. It's called Arunachala Panchakam. It's very, very nice. All essence is Vedanta, as expressions of his own understanding. And eventually his family traced him out. They traced him out because how many young Brahmin boys in Tamil Nadu were sitting in such places? They were able to trace him out. And of course, he wasn't going back home. So his mother came to stay with him. And the last 6 years of her life, she lived with her saintly son. Thus, an ashram grew around Ramana Maharishi. People came, stayed. His brother came, Nagaswami, his older brother. And a little bit of organization began to happen. So food began to be served like this. That's how that place grew around this person. And one significant other scholar, a Tamil poet, Muruganar, who also came and stayed with him for many years. So he would write, on Lord Shiva, Shiva Puranam, glories of Lord Shiva. And there is an episode which comes in this, where there are in this Daruka Vanam, this forest, there are these ascetics living there. There are ascetics who live with their wives, their spouses. So we have two types of the monks and the rishis who were married. So rishi patnis are there, the wives of the rishis. So there were a group of them, they were living together, and they used to do these fire rituals. But in doing these fire rituals, they became ambitious. Because through these rituals, you acquire powers. A lot of powers of the elements come to these ascetics. And they began to acquire power. They were getting more and more power, and they were wanting more and more. So their whole work was not about self-awakening. It was about using the fire rituals, Vedic rituals, to become powerful. And as the story goes, so Lord Shiva, to help them, to bring them back on track, so he chooses to teach them a lesson. So Lord Shiva and Lord Vishnu, they come to this forest. Lord Shiva comes in the form of a young monk, a young ascetic, and Mahavishnu comes as Mohini, a beautiful, celestial woman. And this Mohini approaches, she is alone, and she approaches these ascetics who are doing their rituals. And when she approaches them and she sings, and they are stunned, they are fascinated by her. All of them are drawn to her. And she moves away, and as she is moving, they also decide to leave all this and follow her. And so they start following her. And she lures them away further and further. And they keep following her. Where is she going? They keep going behind her. And they go behind her, and going somewhere into deep forest. This Mohini disappears. And then they wake up. Hey, what happened? Where are we? They get totally lost in the forest. Now they have to find their way back. And they're struggling to find their way back. A lot of time goes by. And during that time, this monk, young monk, remember? He goes to the home. To the homes where these wives are. And again a young, charming ascetic coming into their area, and these women want to please him, ask him what you want, and so on and so forth. They are so enchanted by him. And these two episodes that happen, finally when those ascetics, realize we have been duped here, and when they go within in their vision, they see what is happening in their home. So they manage to return, and they find this ascetic, and now we're not going to leave you. And so they try to shoot, whatever weapons to kill him. First thing they do, with their power, they're all powerful. So they produce a elephant. They produce an elephant, and this elephant charges towards that monk, that young man, and he tears this elephant apart. They see this happening, they produce a tiger, and this tiger charges at him. He kills the tiger in a jiffy and takes the skin of the tiger and wraps it around him. Then they produce this big poisonous snake and direct it towards this ascetic, and this ascetic takes this snake and wraps it around his neck like an ornament. By the time they realize, something is going wrong here, this is not an ordinary ascetic, and they think they have really lost it. Yes, of course they had lost it. And so they seek forgiveness from this ascetic. And then that ascetic teaches them, tells them, all these rituals you are doing for what? For power? What for? What is there in that karma? So there is a teaching that flows from Lord Shiva. So when Muruganar, that poet, was writing, he was writing this episode. He comes to Ramana Maharishi and tells him, there is this teaching that Lord Shiva gives to these ascetics. Please, will you tell us what he taught the ascetics? What was that teachings? And Ramana Maharishi obliges, and he gave 30 verses in Tamil, Those 30 verses was translated later into Telugu, Malayalam, Sanskritam by him, and those 30 verses is called Upadesa Saram. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om. Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.